Is death the final answer? Or is there more? Is there universal lessons that we all must learn in order to progress? Do we all have some work or something we must accomplish before we're allowed to move on? Join us today on Speaking of Spirits as we discuss reincarnation.
Hello, everybody. This is Speaking of Spirits, and today we are going to talk about reincarnation. My name is Colleen, and I'm here with Tim and Katie.
Woohoo!
Hello.
So we've all heard about it. We've heard the, the Shirley MacLaine, she's had 100 lives or whatever it is, right? So, and we joke about it, but there are experiences that people have that they're unexplainable. I mean, how would you know? How would you know the things you know? And I've had my own experience I'll talk about, but I think it's a fascinating topic. Certainly Western cultures, I think, are probably the cultures that don't believe in it. They're believe in it the least. But it seems to be, in Eastern philosophy, it's absolute. There's no question. Reincarnation is out there.
Yeah, I think it is a problem with Christianity. Wow.
Christianity?
Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that would not come out of my mouth. But that being said, it seems like most of the cases in the last few years that have really been studied have been right here in the good old US of A.
Yeah. There was a movie, I want to say it was in the 70s. I'm dating myself now. Okay. And my mom took me to see the movie. And we had both read the book before. And it was called Audrey Rose. And do you remember the movie? Katie's like,
I haven't seen it, but I know of
the story.
Yeah.
So it was a movie it was about a little girl who has these, they thought at the time it was night terrors. Just these horrific nightmares of burning alive in a vehicle. And her parents were like, where's this coming from? They meet a man who studies Eastern philosophy of reincarnation, and he believes, after being around this child for so long, that this is not a night terror, that these are memories. And they end up, and it's a true story. The whole movie is centered around a child that this happened to. And they end up studying her in like this psychic institute thing, right? And they have all of these, the ending was just, ugh. But they have this like glass, like observation room. And they have her go to sleep. And they have all these doctors and scientists and everybody, in true story, watching her as she goes to sleep. She wakes up and she's pounding on what looks like glass, but she comes up to the observation. She's pounding and she's choking, and her hands started blistering from heat that's not there. She ends up dying from smoke inhalation in the room with no smoke.
Wow.
It was a fascinating. I mean, it was bizarre.
Ooh, I got chills.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole movie was about how can this be? I mean, how?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how, like, the power of the mind and what it can do. This one time in one of my many past lives that's in this life, I was a mortician apprentice, and I was shocked how many times people just died because they wanted to die.
Oh.
It's a thing.
I've heard that, like, if
You
you're
just
just ready
shut
to...
down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can see if
crazy.
you're elderly or sick or something, but you mean just anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That is eerie.
It was in the age group from 30 to 80. So we can say anybody there.
It's sad, I guess. The human survival instinct kicks in pretty strong. Our biological body wants to stay alive. So that's pretty strong emotional.
Yeah.
So when I was doing some research on this, reincarnation is also known as a rebirth or transmigration. It's the philosophical or religious concept that the non-physical essence of a living being begins a new life in a different physical form or body after biological death. Resurrection is a similar process hypothesized by some religions in which a soul comes back to life in the same body. In most beliefs involving reincarnation, the soul is seen as immortal, and the only thing that becomes perishable is the body. Upon death, the soul becomes transmigrated into a new infant or an animal to live again. The term transmigration means the passing of a soul from one body to another after death. And I started looking this up, and I could not believe it's in almost every religion or philosophy out there. It is really but Christianity, although Christianity had
Jesus Christ.
He wasn't reincarnated, but resurrected, right?
Right.
But
it's an interesting concept.
Yes.
Still.
Yeah. It's the central tenet of the Indian religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, and most paganisms, although there are Hindu and pagan groups who don't believe in reincarnation instead of believing in an afterlife. That's interesting to me. I've never heard of a pagan group who believed in an afterlife. In most pagans that I'm aware of, it's the soul is leaping. I mean, that's what you're aspiring to, that higher and higher plane, and that's why you keep coming back. It's to better the soul, to keep,
Yeah.
It's like, that's why I figured the reason why I have such shitty luck in this world is because I was like an axe murderer in the last. You know what I mean?
Goofed up
it's like I had to
somewhere.
keep coming back to fix these mistakes. But that's the basic tenet of that reincarnation, is you keep coming back. And it's not just, it's the betterment of the soul is to reach that higher plane at some point. But who knows what that is.
Right.
Nirvana.
Nirvana. Yeah.
So if, like, hearing you read that, it makes me wonder, if you kind of believe in this idea of reincarnation, how does that fit into, like, the paranormal, as far as, like, spirits or, like, dead Uncle Fred floating around, how does that fit in if you believe that, like, the spirit, bounces or leaps forward or is destined for the next stage, and then you have these spirits or souls that are stuck or choose not to,
Right.
How does that play
Maybe
together?
maybe not every body is reincarnated, or maybe it's not immediate, or maybe I think my mom, it was within like 6 months. I think she's gone. I mean, she's like some mouthy 17-year-old now somewhere in the world. You know what I mean? Because she came back once, and it was almost 6 months after she died, and then poof, gone. I cannot reach her on the dowsing rods. I can't. She's never been with me. Now, I've had recently a medium who I had dinner with who said, "No, she's standing right behind you." I've never had a medium say that. No one has ever seen her before. So I don't know if she was connecting with her energy or she physically saw her, but I believe she's gone. My dad, 3 days after he died, he's all over the house. Chaos, So I don't know. And I can communicate with him. I can douse him. But Mom, no. Nothing.
Very interesting. I
Yeah.
wonder if those things are by choice or...
Well, she strongly believed in it. So I'm thinking that she couldn't wait to get into a better body, like
Yeah.
stronger physically, because she had she died basically the flu, but her lungs just gave out with the flu, and so I think she was probably going, man, just make me hot. You know
And
what I
mouthy.
mean? And mouthy,
Hot
right?
and mouthy.
Yeah, so another Marilyn Monroe. So who knows? But I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing, and I have my own story that I'll talk about. But it says, although the majority of denominations within Christianity and Islam do not believe that individuals reincarnate, particular groups within these religions do refer to reincarnation. These groups include mainstream, historical, and contemporary followers of Cathars, Alawites, Druze, and Rosicrucians. The historical relations between these sects and beliefs about reincarnation were characteristics of... Okay, and then it just goes on and on. Neoplatonism,
Lots of syllables.
Why do nerdy people write this stuff? Okay, just saying.
Oh, those nerds.
In recent decades, many Europeans and North Americans have developed an interest in reincarnation, and many contemporary works mention it. So, you said, Tim, that you watched a show on this.
I did.
What
I
is-
was scrolling through the Netflix the other day, and it was called Surviving Death. And it's a little docu-series, and it had different episodes. And I watched 4 of them and fell asleep, because that's what you do with Netflix. And today, I was going through my history, and I thought, oh yeah, that was interesting. And I clicked it, and it just happened to be on reincarnation as the next one. Next and last. And it was actually really, really interesting. It gave a whole bunch of different perspectives, and it gave 3 or 4 examples, and then it followed a doctor who is actively investigating these experiences, and he took on work from a previous doctor. So it's almost, I think they said 80 years.
Wow.
And
Wow, that's so cool.
yeah, and they gave 2 examples of kids that are going through it right now. And they basically said that the memories of the reincarnated, it happens from ages 0 to 5. And that's when you have the biggest memories. And then after 5, they go away, or progressively go away, kind of like your memories from childhood. And it was really interesting. They went to one kid's house, and the kid remembered his name from before, his mom, his dad, the playground he used to play at, and it was actually searchable. It's happened so recently that the mom was able to type it up in Google. And by golly, everything came up, and the kid's 4.
Oh my
He
gosh.
didn't Google all of this. And
Wow.
so the mom contacted the doctor because she typed in reincarnation help.
Help.
And he popped up. And so they showed the first visit with this doctor and the kid. And the doctor did a whole bunch of research on what the kid said. And so he brought pictures of the mom. He brought pictures of the dad, the playground, the apartment, along with 6 other pictures that were just random on the 4. And he picked every one.
Wow.
And he knew the names, and like they were filming the kid doing it, and there was no hesitation. Like,
Wow.
yeah, it was cool.
That's wild.
So was this, do you remember, was this Dr. Ian Stevenson who started it, or do you remember that much?
You know, he looked German, so I know that doesn't help.
So Ian Stevenson was a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, and he spent much of his career collecting and examining cases. Typically, like you said, between the age of 2 and 4, with a mean of 35 months, such children start talking about their previous life, often speaking about the events that led up to their death, sometimes using present tense as if their previous life was continuing. That's cool. That's really cool. Stevenson was able to identify the person the child claimed to be and verify the information by speaking to relatives of the deceased. Since Stevenson's death, other researchers have followed his lead. About 2,500 reports of children's past life memories have been studied. Research has shown that normally children reported previous lives ended prematurely and unnaturally, and often involving violence, suicide, or an accident. In almost 3/4 of the cases, the previous personality, which is a term that Stevenson coined, died relatively young. A quarter died before the age of 15. On average, the previous personalities died 4.5 years before the birth of the child with whom they're associated now. So there's a 4.5 year lag time between that jump into another body, which I found really fascinating.
So what's going on in the lag time?
I don't think time's a construct. That's what I think.
That's fair.
Yeah,
you
that's
don't
true.
feel the 4.5.
Well, so the cooler one out of the two, that one was really cool. There was another boy that they were investigating. And so this was in the early 2000s. And I think this was the doctor's favorite story, is why it came on the Netflix. But the boy, like in 2004, was 3 or 4. And he started talking that he was James the Third, and his real name was James, and that he died in a plane crash. And so his mom was like, oh, okay. And he started telling more and more stories that were more and more vivid. And so the mom was concerned and took him places and really involved the dad. And the dad's like, it's not reincarnation. And so about a year goes by, and the dad is asking his son some of the things. And in the course of their conversation, he got what plane he was in, where he went down, the aircraft carrier that he was on.
Oh,
Good Lord.
And his best friend's name that was on the aircraft carrier. And so his dad was like, fine, I'm going to put this to bed. And of course, it was the early days of old Google. So he walked over to the computer. Everything his son said matched up. Absolutely everything.
wow.
And then he was reading a book about Iwo Jima. And he just had me on the page, and his son said that's where it happened.
What? What?
And so Dad's like, okay. And so he does more research, and it turns out that during Iwo Jima, there was only one plane that wrecked from the squadron that was on that aircraft carrier, and the pilot's name was James Jr.
Wow.
So he was the
Ooh.
third James.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really, really
I think
really
I
cool.
actually saw that episode. It's
Yeah.
bringing back some memories, but yeah,
I need
that's
to watch that. I still got chills.
that's I mean, that's crazy.
Well, yeah, and
There's no way that this child has memories of this. And wasn't this the kid that was also obsessed with World War II history
And planes.
and
like,
planes?
He knew
wonder
everything about the
why.
planes when he went into the museum.
Yeah. He knew everything
Oh.
about the aircraft. That's what blew my mind is, I mean, I grew up in aviation, so little nerdy kids running around the airport, they could tell you everything about planes. But this, he had it was
No
not like his
connection.
dad was a pilot.
Yeah.
He had all this knowledge. Yeah.
Ooh.
I think because this series also had a doctor that was talking to people and when they were in hospice care, right before they died. Because they were talking about the people who were coming to visit them from their family right before they die.
Whoa.
Yeah, he was documenting that. It could have been a different doctor, part of the series.
Yeah,
but
it was probably a different part of the series.
yeah. Fascinating stuff, though.
Wow.
The first one was near-death experiences, and it was really cool. It went through lots of cool things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we tend to blow off the little kids with their, it's just their imaginary friends. Well, you got to wonder how much of it, first, is dead Uncle Fred, and he's really there, or they have these memories because I don't think it's that rare that people are reincarnated. I think it's that rare that we remember.
We remember, or somebody recognizes it. Because as kids, we're sensitive to things, we know things, but it's just kind of like, oh, they're a kid and their imagination. And you have to think about dreams, too. All the dreams you have as a kid.
No one takes into account the soul. And who knows how old each one of our souls are.
Right.
I have had really cool experiences with my youngest son. I think we're about the same age, to tell you the truth. When it comes to soul things.
Wow.
We think the same way. We do the same things. And I think it has more to do with that than anything, honestly.
Wow. I believe that. I believe in, like, our souls are different ages, and
right.
I totally believe that.
There's this case that they studied of Ryan Hammonds. Around the age of 4, Ryan Hammonds told his mother, Cindy, "I think I used to be somebody else." Whenever they saw a Hollywood sign on TV, Ryan would get excited, the big Hollywood on the mountain, saying that was his home and he wanted to go back. He said that he'd been an agent in Hollywood and that the agency had changed people's names. So that makes sense, right? Because most people take an assumed name. He talked about dancing on Broadway and living in a house with a large swimming pool. Sometimes when songs came on the radio, he would stand up and start tap dancing. Now he's 4. And he talked about going to fancy parties with a cowboy man who had a horse that performed tricks and also did cigarette commercials. Okay. At school, when asked to draw pictures of his home, he would always draw 4 people, himself and his parents, and the old me. Yeah. Cindy began to write down everything Ryan told her about his past life. She borrowed books from Hollywood from the local library, hoping that it could help him recover memories. In one book, he found a still from an old movie called Night After Night. Ryan became very animated and shouted, "Mommy, that's George. We did a picture together." Then he pointed to a man on the side of the photo and said, "And that's me." Ryan had always said that he didn't know the name of his previous personality, and at first Cindy was unable to identify the man. However, she found out that the other man was an actor named George Raft. When Ryan was 5, his mother made contact with Jim Tucker, who agreed to investigate his claims. A film archivist employed by a TV production company who made a documentary about Ryan, identified the man Ryan said was me as Marty Martin, a dancer, singer, and agent who died in 1964. When Tucker visited Ryan and his parents, Ryan was asked to pick out photos of the people and places related to Marty Martin, which he did successfully, just like the other little boy. Most of Ryan's statements about his previous life had been recorded by his mother before Tucker got involved, and before Marty Martin was identified. Some statements had already been verified by his mother. For example, she confirmed that the cowboy friend he spoke about was a man called Wild Bill Elliott. With Tucker's help, other statements were verified from places like public records, national archives, newspapers, obituaries, travel documents, census reports. Since Martin was an obscure figure, there was no information about him on the internet, at least at that time. But they were able to verify all kinds of other information. And this kid's 4.
Yeah.
It's so wild.
So that one was on the show, too.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, and it was one of the last ones, and they were following up with him. And so basically they sent a pamphlet, and it was 54 questions that the boy, wrote down. And he sent it to Marty's daughter. And the daughter said she answered yes to 52 of them, and 2 were no. And she said after research, those 2 were actually yeses. And so he was spot on with all of them.
Wow.
And they actually had a really awkward meeting between Marty and the wife and daughter. It was awkward.
Now that he's a teenager, he had no more memories, like the memories vanished. And kind of a similar thing happened with me in the sense that I was 5. And my mom took me to a place. There was a place in Southern California, somewhere in Los Angeles County, called Alvera Street. And it's like, you have a little Chinatown. It was like little Mexican town. She took me there one day, and it was several blocks of vendors and stores. It was all Mexican goods and wares and all this stuff. And she said I grabbed her by the hand and was so excited to be back, and that I led her around the corner, down into a basement of a candle maker. Guy was making candles. Little guy spoke no English. And I hopped up on a stool and started asking him all about the family. And his mom's just like looking at me and looking at this guy, and she totally believed in reincarnation. So he had asked her, my mom spoke Spanish. He's like, what's going on? She said, why don't you just go with this for a minute? I kind of want to hear what she has to say. And we spoke about aunts and cousins and the home, in Mexico and all this stuff. And he was answering questions. He's like, obviously she knows what's going on. And we conversed. Now, I knew Spanish a little bit when I was a kid because we had somebody who spoke Spanish in our household. And so I knew some Spanish, but I was like all of a sudden fluent in like Castilian Spanish, which is what he spoke.
Yeah.
Which is a little different than
insane.
the Spanish that comes from Mexico. But in this conversation, some of these people were from Spain. And I was like right on it. Mom's like, oh my God. And then we left. She's like, she's never been there before. I'd never been there. I was 5. Wow. She'd never taken me there before. And how did I know this little guy was around the corner in a basement making candles? Yeah. So I remember distinctly the shop, and I remember what he looked like. The sights, the smells, everything about his shop, but I don't remember any of the conversation.
That's so crazy.
Well, and in this video I was watching, they said that a lot of times if there's some sort of closure, like you're able to ask the questions, or with the kid in the planes, they were able to go there and they did a little memorial service. Afterwards, they're able to really integrate into their own lives.
Oh, so like all of a sudden you're no longer torn between the two. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Gotcha. It's like there's an ending and then the new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like reincarnation happens later after that closure.
That's interesting. I wonder, you got to wonder how many kids are actually experiencing this, but nobody's listening.
Yeah.
I was just lucky that I had a mom who was totally into it.
Into that.
I mean, she'd probably make Shirley MacLaine look tame. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Shirley MacLaine was the first like big star that came forward and said, no, I've had multiple lives, and wrote the book, and everybody went, wow, she's bananas.
She's crazy.
But I mean, Hindu, all of these other religions, they completely...
It's normal.
And you're not only a human or an animal, you could be a rock, you could be a tree. I mean, your soul comes back. That's a little bizarre for me. But I can understand a living organism.
Yeah.
I just, with my luck, I'll be a banana slug next time or something like that. But you know what I'm saying? But
yeah.
That, to me, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why a lot of little boys like throwing rocks. They remember their past life and they want some thrill.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was kind of funny you talk about that. My friend's little boy, when he, now he's an adult with a family, but I remember when he had all this pent-up aggression, she'd just give him a dozen eggs and he could go out there and lob it at the pine trees as hard as he wanted to.
There you go.
Not going to hurt anything.
That was back before eggs were $7.
Yeah, right? I mean, I know.
Seriously.
So, I don't know, you could get really deep. If you do some research on this, you can get really deep on some of the different religions and spiritualities that really, really prescribe to reincarnation. But one of the ones that Celtic paganism is a big follower of reincarnation. And I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine also like the Vikings, because they kept dying to go into Valhalla. You've ascended to a different level, right?
Yeah.
It was a big deal. So, but Julius Caesar recorded that the Druids of Gaul, Britain, and Ireland had psychosis as one of their core doctrines. So the principal point of their doctrine is that the soul does not die, and that after death it just passes from one body to another. The main object of all education is, in their opinion, to imbue the scholars with the firm belief that the indestructibility of the human soul, which according to their belief merely passes at death from one tenement to another, it robs death of all its terrors, because it's not the end. It's not the end.
Yeah.
And if if you've worked in the paranormal world at all, that it's not the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know from my dad's death experience how many people came to usher him through
That's so amazing.
So I guess you go back to your question, Katie. You're like, well, then is dead Uncle Fred? What happens? I don't know, because my dad's still bumbling around my house every day.
Maybe there just isn't. Maybe I feel like you're destined to go somewhere or to fill some kind of destiny. So maybe his next journey just isn't ready yet.
Either that, or it's kind of interesting. I've always thought my dad was probably at a, and it's not just because he was my dad. There was something about him that I always felt like he was at a higher level than almost anybody I'd ever met. Like, he was so just serene. I don't know if that came from war, because I asked him a few times, like, how come you don't have PTSD from the war? He was in Korean mostly. He enlisted during World War II, but then he saw a lot of action in Korea and was awarded a lot of medals. And he said, I made the conscious decision when I came home that I could either stay at the war, or get busy living. And he left. He said, he goes, I can remember maybe twice I had a nightmare about some of the stuff that I saw. He goes, but I lived forward, never backwards. He always lived forward. But that level of serene and calm, it's like, that's not like normal.
Yeah, that's like,
you know what I mean?
That's towards enlightenment.
Riddled with anxiety all the time, and it's like, oh my God, how do you get there? But I wonder if it's because he just kept coming back.
He's
over and
lived
over.
a lot.
He's lived so long, so much that he was just like, tomorrow it'll work itself out. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
He just was always, but he never dealt with ugly. He would never dealt with. I would go out and kick a tree because I'd be like, oh my God, can you just be upset? He's like, why?
Yeah.
That would send me even more. I know.
I immediately liked your dad. He was a good dude.
He was really cool. Yeah, he was just kind of just a very happy, serene, very introspective. Like, he just thought things through.
Very self-aware.
Yeah.
I think that's like an indication of like an old soul and someone who's and self. That
word old soul. I have met children like your son, like you talk about your son, where you meet them and you're like, oh my God. They're like 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
They're not a normal, chaotic. They have really high level of intellectual conversations with adults. That's not normal. Mm-hmm. Most of them are running around with, I don't know, I never watched it, SpongeBob and all that weird stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? So, and that I have a friend's little girl, and she can converse with you at 6. Mm-hmm. She converses with you, and she asks things, and she thinks about things at a level that maybe it's because I don't have kids, but when I'm around people's children, I'm like, she's not normal, and it's not a bad thing. Yeah. It's like she's achieved something already.
She's on a different level, a different plane. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly it. When he came out, he was perfectly calm, and they gave him to me. I took him to the nurse bathing thing. I was like, look, a baby. Look. Took care of him. He started crying when they started cleaning him up. Then I gave him a bottle, and they usually only take a little bit. 2 bottles down like that. And I was like, I think we're going to get along.
Wow. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, in early texts of Hinduism, Buddhism, I think I might have talked about this, and Jainism share the... I have never heard of Jainism, have you?
When I was researching this, yes, but it's not
I'd never
something I
heard of
was
that
familiar
before.
with
No.
before. No.
I think you can add ism to anything.
Well,
and
yeah.
it's a
Right?
thing.
You're like, familiar.
So, they share the concept and terminology related to reincarnation. They also emphasize similar virtuous practices and karma as necessary for liberation and what influences future rebirths. Karma, so I guess good or bad, right? Yeah.
Yeah, or I kind of understand karma as like your action has a consequence, and that's how you learn to do better, and that's how you like.
You mean even
to-
in the next life?
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why I said I was an axe murderer. Yeah. Pretty sure. Well, and I'm pretty sure I was hanged because I can't have anything on my throat.
I have heard that from people.
I'm pretty sure I was swinging from a gallows somewhere because anything touches my... Oh,
You're
like even a
feel
scarf
like-
in the winter, it has to
Yeah.
be brutal cold for me to put something on my neck because it...
I've heard that from people and like other mediums that are like, if you have
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
uncomfortable, I'm like, okay.
If I was like in a past life regression, they're gonna like, oh my god,
trauma.
who were you? I was not a queen. No,
Like, no, I
No,
was
I
down
was
on
a
the gallows.
maybe that's why I'm so attracted to true crime now.
It's your past life
Yeah.
speaking to you, calling to
I remember
you.
doing that.
Yeah. Wow. See now DNA. I knew about it long before they
Trying
did.
to tempt you back to the dark side.
So there's this Hindu traditions consider the soul to be unchanging. And it's an unchanging eternal essence of a living being, and that journeys across reincarnations until it attains self-knowledge. Then I don't know what happens. But so scientists have studied the weight of the body in death. And the body loses something like 2 ounces after death. Like after the lungs have...
Like everything is released.
After everything's released, then about like 4 or 5 minutes later, the body loses a couple of
Ooh,
ounces.
that's
And they've done this repeatedly. Like this is every time. And they're thinking it's the soul once the soul leaves. Like the soul has a physical mass to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that pretty
That's very
interesting in this research is that there's a weight to the soul and they
Yeah.
can measure it.
It's interesting to me how easy it is, especially like Western culture and like the mono religions like Islam and Christianity, to kind of deny the idea of reincarnation, but they'll acknowledge the fact, like the basic science law that's like energy can't be created or destroyed. Okay, well then what happens to it?
Right.
If we're energy in our souls, and it's very interesting to me. But it's interesting that it can be measured.
Yeah. They started in, I don't know how long they've been measuring it, but I did read a study where they have consistently measured the same mass leaves the body. It's...
Oh, that's almost kind of like eerie. Because can you imagine like you're there and you're like witnessing it, right? Because you're like
Right.
attending the body. Ooh, that just is like crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like
It-
you're
it's
witnessing
eerie.
the passing on and like a new journey for someone potentially. That's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
So I've been 3 great-grandparents and 2 grandparents I've been present during. And it was amazing how 3 of them were almost a fabulous, joyous occasion, and 2 of them were kind of scary. And
Very
I think it was just,
interesting.
Was it your age that made him scary or?
I don't know. It could have been. That could have something to do with it. But I think it was just the feeling of the room.
Yeah, like an energy shift. And
I know, so the passing of my mom and the passing of my dad was 2 completely separate things because my mom was in the hospital. But she wouldn't go until I told her it was okay. Because I knew she was struggling. I knew she was hanging on. And when I finally said it's okay, she'd gone.
wow.
But my dad was almost joyous because of so many people that came in to usher him across. And, the dead, they were filling up the house. It was just amazing. And then that one experience, even though I've talked to the dead for years, and even though we do what we do in the paranormal world, right? Everybody has that little tinge of fear, right?
Oh, of course.
Watching that experience, I know absolutely without a doubt you are not alone. There is so many people that usher you across. I mean, the house literally filled up, and a lot of the people I didn't know. There were guys with flight suits.
Wow.
There were, I mean, it was just filled. Bob was there with me. He was a guy in our team, and a friend who's his, and it was really the first time I saw the dead the way I saw the dead. I can feel them, I can sense them, I can talk to them, but all of a sudden it was like a movie playing out, and they just started filling up the house. And it was when my stepmom came through the door, and she stood at the foot of his bed, and she smiled. It was kind of like, what the hell took you so long, O'Hara? You know?
Wow.
And she was just like so excited that he was ready. And then, poof, they were gone. That fast. It was when she came to the door, because it was like everybody was waiting. Like, come on, O'Hara, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And then she knew he was going to take his last breath. She walked in, and the way they went. And so it's like, I have absolutely zero fear now, because it's
Wow.
none. So
That's crazy.
nobody's alone, but I don't know. I guess, do we all go to another body?
That's what I'm like.
I don't know.
I wonder.
Because people who can talk to the dead and see the dead can see the same person in their house for 30 years.
Yeah.
So can you be in two places at once? I don't know. It's a really good question. And I don't know that it's ever been studied. Like, can dead Uncle Fred be Joe somewhere else? And then still be dead Uncle Fred in a different plane?
Is it like a time plane thing? Like string theory? Like,
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
That's kind of
You could
interesting.
get crazy with that, honestly. You could go down the rabbit hole, but it's interesting. Or people that don't believe in reincarnation, don't believe in an afterlife. You know, it's like if a tree falls over in a forest and there's no one there to hear it.
Do they just stop?
Yeah, does it just stop? Do you have to like give your consent or acknowledge that it's happening? Is that why people get stuck? I need to know these answers.
Oh, that's a really good question. Is it a permission based thing?
Yeah, permission or at least acknowledgement.
Well, like, well, God. So think
Right?
about that story about Audrey Rose and how she died.
Oh,
She died of smoke inhalation in a room with no
terrible.
smoke, and she had third-degree burns on her hands where there was no fire.
Oh,
And so
it's wild.
I wouldn't think that you would give permission to live through that.
Yeah. But I feel like that's also a rare case. So it's like, what outlying factors,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, did trauma literally manifest itself because the energy was so strong because of such a traumatic situation?
Well, that could be.
I don't know. Answer. Somebody
Or-
needs to get on this and figure it out.
I know, right?
Yes.
Come on, man. Somebody smarter than me figure this out.
One of those syllable guys.
Yes. Oh my God.
The guys that write the stuff that I read, I can't even pronounce some of the words. I mean, come on, guys. Dumb it down a little bit for the rest of us, all
Oh,
right?
I literally have Google open in an extra tab to like Google words. I'm like, wait, what does that mean?
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's like being when I first got out of the service, so I thought I had all these aspirations to be medical transcriptionist.
Oh my
Forget about it.
it.
I could handle it if it was an English doctor, but you get somebody with a little bit of an accent, nope.
You're like, huh?
Nope.
Yeah.
Too
So-
much.
One of my daughter's first eye doctors, he did the transcript thing, and he had a button on the floor, and he just said things into it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe some of the words that were coming out of that man's mouth. I still have no idea what it meant.
No, I think
And
they're
I
made
thought,
up.
There's somebody typing this out. And I wonder if they know or they're just putting syllables down.
No, you have to know, because the thing is, you're graded on your accuracy.
Yeah.
Like, and you could lose your job if you're typing in the wrong diagnosis or the wrong terminology. And I'm like, you know what? That's a little that's pressure. I can't
Yeah.
do this.
But if you don't have context for it, it just sounds like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Cool.
Guilty.
Yes. Crazy.
Well, we thank you for joining us tonight for this topic. I thought it was kind of an interesting one. And I am really curious to know, if you've listening to this podcast, if you think you have ever had Any experience with reincarnation? If you think, do you have any memories of it, or your children? Particularly if anything could be verified. So I don't know that I ever talked to my mom about anything until we got there that day.
So crazy.
She said there was never, that I don't have any memory of ever saying, "Oh yeah, Aunt so and so in Mexico." I don't. So it was just like a one-day event for me. So I don't know if other people's kids have had those kind of events, and it's like all of a sudden I was just full of all this information, and then poof, it was gone. I don't know.
It's like being there maybe like triggered that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I'd love to hear from, listeners of the podcast if you've had experiences, or especially with your kids, if you've noticed anything like that.
All the stories. Send them, all of them.
Yes, we want to hear. Thank you for listening to Speaking of Spirits, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to Speaking of Spirits, powered by Pocatello Paranormal Research in Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do us a favor and go to whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on and give us a review. We prefer the 5-star reviews. This helps us know how we're doing, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next podcast.
Ha 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 ha.